My name is Harold Hal Morrison, and I found out what it feels like to get erased right in front of 200 people. Thiergen was swelling behind the church doors when my wife grabbed my sleeve and hissed, "Hal, you're not on the list." The usher's clipboard didn't shake. My hands did. People turned, heads tilted. A whole crowd stared like I'd track mud onto clean carpet. I smiled anyway. "It's okay," I said. And then I went home and called my lawyer. I'll tell you how a man who spent 14 years fixing everyone else's comfort learned to stop begging for a seat at his own table. It was Saturday, late May, one of those Iowa mornings where the sky looks polished like somebody scrubbed it clean for a wedding. I'd been up since 5, old a bit, even semi-retired. My body still wakes like there's a job site waiting. In my kitchen in Cedar Rapids, the coffee maker gurgled and popped, filling the house with that dark, bitter smell that feels like a handshake. I stood at the counter, tugging at my tie like it was a stubborn knot in ductwork. Diane had been floating around the house all week like a hummingbird, busy, stressed, and somehow still making it look graceful. Emily's big day. She kept saying, "Can you believe it? Our girl is getting married." Our girl Emily Carter was my stepdaughter. I came into her life when she was 11, to front teeth too big for her mouth and a chip on her shoulder the size of a corn silo. Diane and I had been married 14 years, and I'd been there for braces and driver's ed and prom pictures. And the night she called crying because her first boyfriend dumped her before homecoming. I wasn't her biological father. I knew that. I never tried to pretend otherwise. But I was the man who showed up when the tire blew on Interstate 380. I was the man who sat in the waiting room when she got her wisdom teeth out. I was the man who handed over a check for community college. When Diane said, "Hal, it would mean the world." So, when Diane told me we needed to be at St. Mark's Lutheran by 10 o'clock, I was ready by 9 o'clock. I'd pulled my old suit out of the closet, the one I wore to my mother's funeral and one cousin's wedding down in Missouri. It still smelled faintly like cedar and dry cleaning chemicals. My hands looked strange against that crisp fabric, knuckles, rough and thick fingernails that never stayed perfect likely, and no matter how much lava soap I used. That's the thing about being HVAC for 35 years. You can scrub and screw band, there's still a little bit of the job left under your skin. I used to be proud of that. Still am most days. Diana came down the stairs in a soft blue dress, hair pinned up, neat earrings catching the morning light. She looked beautiful truthfully. She always did when she wanted to. She checked herself in the hall mirror, then glanced at me. "You look nice," she said, and it sounded like she meant it. "Yeah." I smoothed my lapel. "I feel like a kid wearing his dad's suit." She laughed a quick little sound. "Oh, Hal, you'll be fine." We climbed into her SUV, her wedding car, she called it, because mine was a B-top F-150 that still had a faint rattle behind the glove box. The seats in the SUV smelled like lavender air freshener. Diane drove with both hands on the wheel jaw, tight ice flicking to the clock on the dash. "Emily been nervous?" I asked. "She's excited," Diane said. Then after a beat, "It's a lot. Ryan's family. You know how they are. Ryan Blake, the groom. I'd met him maybe 5 times. He shook hands like he was closing the deal. Nice enough, too smooth for my taste, but I'd learned not to judge young men too fast. I'd been young once, too." "What do you mean?" I asked. Diane made a little noise. "Nothing. Just his parents' era particular. Particular. That's what Diane called people who wanted things just so. She loved those people secretly. She liked the shine of them. The way they talked about vacations and the right schools and wine that cost more than my first set of tools." I stared out the window as we drove past the Hy-Vee on Edgewood Road and Thestrip Mall with the nail salon and the Casey's. The world was doing its Saturday thing. People mowing, kids on bikes, old men in ball caps heading to Menards. And there I was, dressed up like a stranger in my own life. St. Mark's Lutheran sat on a corner lot brick building with tall windows and a bell tower that made it look older than it was. The parking lot was already crowded. Cars lined up like ants. Diane found a spot near the side, and as soon as we stepped out, I heard at the organ inside, not loud, but steady, a swell off notes that made the hair on my arms rise like a memory. The air smelled like cut grass and lilacs from the bushes north entrance. People were gathered outside, laughing, hugging, fussing with corriges. I recognized a few faces, women from Diane's church circle, a couple of Emily's old teachers, one of Diane's cousins from Waterloo. Diane waved and smiled and moved through them like she belonged there. I walked beside her, keeping my shoulders squared, trying to feel like I belonged, too. We reached the main doors. 2 ushers stood there, in dark suits holding programs. One of them was young, maybe 20, with a clean haircut and nervous eyes. The other was older, gay-haired, with that stern church face some men wear like a badge. A little table was set up beside the doors with a floral arrangement and a clipboard. A woman stood there with a pen, her lips pursed like she was guarding Fort Knox. Name. She asked without looking up. Diane leaned in, all pleasant. Diane Morrison. The woman flipped a page on the clipboard. I heard paper scrape sharp in the air. Okay. Yes. The woman smiled up at Diane. Table 4. Diane turned and gestured toward me, and my husband, Harold Morrison. Hal. The woman's pen paused. She flipped another page, then another. The smile on her face stiffened. I'm sorry, she said slowly. Can you repeat that? Harold Morrison, Diane said, still smiling, but now with that edge of impatience. My husband. The woman looked down again, lips moving as she scanned. The young usher shifted his weight. I could see a bead of sweat at his temple. I am not seeing that name, the woman said. It was like somebody turned the temperature down 10. The lilacs didn't smell as sweet no more. Diane blinked. What do you mean you're not seeing it? The woman lifted her eyes, and there was something in them. Awkward pity, like when a cashier tells you your card got declined. I'm not seeing Mr. Morrison on the guest list, she said. Behind us, people were moving toward the doors in little waves. Laughter quieted. A couple of heads turned. Diane's hand found my sleeve, finger squeezing hard. How? She whispered, voice tight. You're not on the list. There must be a mistake. The older usher cleared his throat. Ma'am, we have to go by what's here. The young usher didn't look at me. He stared at Theffler like it might swallow him. I felt my face heat up. Not like anger, like embarrassment, like when you trip in public and pretend you meant to. 200 people. That number sounds dramatic, but it's what it felt like. A whole church worth of eyes all pointed toward me. I saw Walt Danner, an old client from Orion, standing a few steps back in a tan suit. I'd replaced the compressor on his AC 2 summers ago when it was 95 and his wife was about to faint. He'd shaken my hand, then called me a lifesaver. Now he looked at me, and then looked away like my shame might be contagious. Somebody whispered, "Is that her husband?" Another voice, quieter, "I thought so. Why isn't he going in?" Diane's nails dug into my sleeve. Hal, she said again, like if she said it enough times, the list would change. I looked at the clipboard, at the nitros of names, at the woman's pen hovering like a judge's gavel. For half a second, my chest tightened so hard I thought I might not breathe. There was a childish urge in me, loud, raw, to say, "That's ridiculous. I paid for half off this," but I didn't. I heard my father's voice in my head from long ago. "Don't make a scene. Handle it quiet." So, I smiled. It probably looks strange. Ammon smiling while he's getting humiliated. "It's okay," I said. Diane's eyes flashed at me. "Hell no. It's fine," I repeated softer. "I don't want to hold up the line." The older usher nodded, relieved. The woman with the clipboard let out a tiny breath like she'd been holding it. Diane leaned close, voice low and sharp. "Go around to the side. I'll talk to someone. This is wrong." I nodded like I believed her. Then I stepped back from the doors. The organ inside swelled again. A bright burst of sound. Somebody laughed behind him. A camera clicked. I walked away. I didn't run. I didn't stomp. I walked down those brick steps like a man leaving a hardware store with the wrong part. Quietly irritated, pretending it didn't matter. Rain had started light and steady speckling my suit jacket. The parking lot shimmered. The sky so polished earlier now looked bruised. I climbed into the F-150, yes. I'd drive in the truck separately because Diane insisted on bringing a bunch of wedding supplies in the SUV, and because I'd planned to leave early if my knee started acting up. That's what I told myself anyway. I sat there with my hands in the steering wheel staring at the church doors. People kept going in. No one stopped me. No one called my name. I started the truck. The engine rumbled low, familiar, comforting in a way. As it pulled out, I caught a glimpse of Diane through the glass doors. She was talking fast to someone, her hands fluttering. She never once looked out toward the parking lot. The drive home took 20 minutes, but it felt longer. Rain tapped the windshield in a steady rhythm. The wipers squeaked on the slow setting. That old rubber sound that always made him think of long trips and bad weather. I passed Casey's and thought about stopping for a coffee, then kept going. I didn't want anyone to recognize me. Not right then. I didn't want to hear, "Hey, Hal, aren't you supposed to be at the wedding?" At home, the house was quiet. The air inside smelled faintly of lemon cleaner Diane's doing. She'd been scrubbing all week like Emily's wedding was going to be held in our living room. I hung my suit jacket on the back of a chair and loosened my tie. My hands were still trembling a little like they didn't know what to do with themselves. I poured myself coffee from the pot that had been sitting all morning. It tasted burnt. I drank it anyway. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the grain in the wood like it might tell me what happened. My pocket buzzed. Voicemail. I stared at the screen. Diane's name. I pressed play. Her voice came through breathy and rushed. "Hal, hey, you went home, right? Listen, don't talk to anybody, okay? It's complicated. Just come back later after the ceremony. We'll talk tonight." Complicated. My stomach sank. I walked to the hallway closet where I kept my old work files, the ones I couldn't bring myself to toss. HVAC bids, receipts, warranties, and in the bottom drawer, a folder I'd labeled in black marker months ago. Family wedding. Diane had laughed when she saw it. "You and your paperwork, Hal, measure twice, cut once." I pulled the folder out and set it on the table. Inside were copies of checks, deposit receipts, and email chain with Thivanu, and a contract I'd signed without thinking too hard because Diane said they just need a responsible party. Responsible party. I flipped to the signature page. There it was in blue ink. Harold Morrison. My name was on the paperwork, just not on the list. I sat back in my chair, coffee turning cold rain, whispering against the window. And for the first time in 14 years, I didn't feel like a husband. I felt like a tool somebody used and put away. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Diane back. I called Marion Stokes, my old attorney from when I sold my business, and had to make sure everything was clean. Sheen's word on the third ring voice, calm like she'd been waiting for trouble her whole career. "Marianne," I said, my throat tight. "It's Hal Morrison. I need clarity, and I need it today." The coffee had gone cold by the time I opened the folder. I didn't notice at first. My hands were busy spreading papers across the kitchen table, lining them up the way I always had edges. Straight corner square. Old habit from years of laying duct work. Measure twice, cut once. The folder was thicker than it had any right to be. Diane had teased me about it more than once. "You don't need to keep every scrap of paper, Hal. It's not a job site." Maybe not. But it was my money, my name, my signature. I flipped the first page over and saw the carbon copy of a check $6,500 made out to St. Mark's Fellowship Hall, deposit for the reception space. I remembered writing that check at this free table, Diane hovering nearby, phone pressed to her ear, while Emily talked excitedly on the other end. "Howell's taking care of it," Diane had said. Then yes, today I slid that paper aside. Under it was the invoice from the caterer in Marion. Another check, another signature. Mine. The house was keyed except for the refrigerator, cycling on and off. That low hum that reminded me of basement and boiler rooms. I could still hear the organ music in my head swelling and stopping, swelling and stopping like it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be. I sat down and rubbed my face with both hands. My palms were rough, calloused from decades of sheet metal and tools. Even after retiring, even after weeks where the hardest thing I lifted was a grocery bag, those calluses never went away. Funny what sticks. As I sorted through the papers, memories kept slipping in where they weren't invited. Emily at 13 sitting at the same table with a mouthful of braces complaining that they hurt. Me handing over a milkshake and saying, "You'll be glad you did this someday." She'd rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. I pulled out a receipt from the orthodontist office in Heiawa. Diane's handwriting on the corner. "Thanks, Hal." I'd smiled when I saw that heart back then. I wasn't smiling now. I kept going. There was the bill from the dress shop in Des Moines. My contribution, Diane had called it. Not the whole thing, just a help. I remembered standing in the shop doorway surrounded by lace and mirrors, feeling out of place while Emily spun around in address. She'd loved. "You're really doing this," I'd said. She'd hugged me quick and tight. Thanks, Hal, not dad, never dad, but not nothing either. At least that's what I thought. Another memory surfaced as I slid a stack of papers aside. A July afternoon 5 years back, 92 heat shimmering off the asphalt at the high parking lot. Emily's old Corolla had died in the middle of the lane, AC blowing hot air like a hair dryer. She'd called me panicked. "I can't drive it like this," she'd said. "I'm going to melt." I'd grabbed my tools and driven out there, sweat soaking through my shirt while I replaced a blown capacitor. The moment the cold air kicked back on, she'd laughed and clapped like I'd performed magic. "You're the best," she'd said. I'd driven home that day feeling 10 feet tall. Now sitting alone at my kitchen table, that same table where I'd helped her fill out FAFSA forms and loan applications, I felt about 2 in tall. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Diane, please don't make this worse." Worse than what, I wondered. Worse than being told I didn't exist. I didn't respond. Instead, I kept reading. Near the bottom of the folder was an email printout. I'd almost forgotten about it. The subject line read, "Wedding Logistics." I skimmed until a sentence jumped out and hooked me right behind the ribs. "How mom's handling everything guest-related, so don't worry about the details." Emily had sent that 3 months ago. I'd read it then, and thought nothing of it. Diane did handle that kind of thing. She loved lists, loved planning, loved control. But reading it now with the echo of "You're not on the list" still ringing in my ears, it sounded different, less reassuring, more final. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Was that it? Had I been quietly moved from family to details we don't need to bother with? The thought made my chest ache, not sharp, just dull and heavy, like something lodged there that wouldn't move. I thought about my first marriage, then something I hadn't done in years. How that had ended not with shouting or slam doors, but with silence, with me letting little things slide because I didn't want to rock the boat. With my ex-wife slowly making decisions without me until one day I realized I was living in someone else's life. I'd promised Miss I'd never do that again. And yet, here I was. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in a while. Frank Heller. Frank and I had worked together for years before I sold me business. He was the kind of guy who told you the truth whether you wanted it or not. The phone rang twice before he answered. Howie said, "What's up? Aren't you at a wedding today, or something?" I swallowed was. There was a pause. That doesn't sound good. I told him, no everything, just enough. Frank listened without interrupting, which was rare for him. When I finished, he let out a long breath. "They crossed you off," he said. "That's what this is." "It's probably a mistake," I said automatically. "Bull," Frank replied. "Mistakes get fixed." This didn't. I stared at the folder. I don't want to be that guy, Frank, the bitter one making a fuss over a piece of paper. Frank snorted. "Hell, it's not the paper. It's what they think you are or aren't." I said nothing. "You've been paying and fixing and smoothing things over for years," he went on. "At some point, people start thinking that's just air always there. Don't notice it till it's gone." My throat tightened. "What am I supposed to do?" "Stop pretending it doesn't hurt," Frank said. "And stop protecting people who won't protect you." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, phone heavy in my hand. I thought about calling Diane back, about driving back to the church and demanding an explanation, about standing up in front of everyone and saying I belong here. The image made my stomach twist. I'd spent my whole life avoiding scenes on job sites, in marriages, in rooms where I felt out of place. I fixed things quietly. I stayed late. I paid the bill. That was my role. But roles I was starting to see could bear written without your permission. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Diane. "Diane, we'll talk later. Please don't embarrass Emily." Embarrassed, I looked down at my hands at the veins and scars and grease that never quite came out. I wasn't embarrassed. I was angry. And beneath that anger was something worse. A cold, steady realization that if I stayed quiet again, nothing would change. Not this time. Not ever. I thought of the contract in the folder. Of the words I'd skimmed back when Diane pushed it across the table and said, "They just need a responsible party." Responsible. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found Marianne's name again. My thumb hovered over the call button. For a second, I almost put the phone down. Old instincts die hard. Then I remembered the clipboard, the whispering, the way Diane hadn't looked back at me as I walked away. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Mary Ann Stokes, she answered. It's Hal Morrison, I said. I need to understand what my name actually means on these papers. There was a brief pause, then her voice softened, professional, but kind. All right, Hal, start from the beginning. I looked at the folder spread across my table at the life I'd funded without question. And for the first time that day, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. Mary Ann didn't rush me. That was the first thing I noticed as I sat at my kitchen table with the phone pressed too. Things out loud that I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. I told her about the church, about the clipboard, about Deanne's hand on my sleeve, and the way she whispered like my presence was the problem. I told her about the folder, the checks, the contracts I'd signed without much thought because they were for family. When I finished, there was a moment of silence on the line. Not awkward, thoughtful. Howell, Mary Ann said finally. Do you have the venue contract in front of you? Yes, I said, sliding the paper closer. Page 3, I think. Good. Look for a section labeled Responsible Party or Liability Waiver. I found it. Black text, small font. Fecund of language that makes your eyes glaze over if you're not careful. I see it, I said. Whose name is there? I didn't even have to check again. Mine. And the signature. Mine, too. All right, Mary Ann said. That means, legally speaking, you weren't just helping. You were the guarantor. The word landed heavier than I expected. Guarantor, I repeated. It means, she said calmly, that if anything had gone wrong at that wedding, someone slipping property damage, an insurance issue, you would be the first person they'd come after. Not Deanne, not Emily, you? I stared at the paper, my name printed so neatly at the bottom. But I wasn't even allowed in, I said. You understand, Mary Ann replied. And that's exactly the issue. I felt a dull pressure build behind my eyes. Not ears, just heat. Hal, she continued. Were there any amendments to the contract? Any changes to the host, felisted family, or the event description after you sign? I don't know, I said. Diane handled all that. Mary Ann exhaled softly. If there were changes made without your knowledge, especially ones that affect how you're represented, that matters a lot. I leaned back in my chair. The refrigerator hummed. The house felt too quiet for what was happening inside my head. So, what are you saying? I asked. That I can what? Shut the whole thing down. She didn't hesitate. You could, but that's not what I'm suggesting. I waited. What I'm suggesting, she said, is that you have the right to correct the record to make sure your name is treated consistently across all documents. You don't have to cancel anything. You don't have to make a scene. A bitter laugh slipped out. Little late for that. I mean legally, she said gently. This isn't about revenge, Hal. It's about accountability. Accountability. I thought about that word as I stared at the rain streaking down the glass. I'd spent my whole career being accountable. If an HVAC system failed, it was on me. If a job went over budget, I explained it. If I made a mistake, I fixed it. And yet, here I was being told I didn't belong at an event I was legally responsible for. Do you have any other paperwork? Mary Ann asked. Insurance forms, deposits. I flipped through the folder again more carefully this time. There it was. A separate document from an insurance company in Des Moines, event coverage, the premium paid in full, and who's listed as the insured party. Mary Ann asked. My name, I said quietly. She let that sit. How? She said if they change how you were presented socially guest lists, seating introductions without updating these documents, that creates a disconnect. You have every right to request clarification. Clarification, not punishment, not destruction, just truth. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at the contract like it might change if I looked at it hard enough. My head throbbed faintly. I realized I hadn't slept more than a few hours the night before. Between the rehearsal dinner Diane went to without and the knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen sleep had been a stranger. I grabbed my keys and decided to get out of the house. Casey's was only a few minutes away. The parking lot was half full pickup trucks, a couple off-seasons, the usual Saturday crowd. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and breakfast pizza. The familiar scent grounded me more than I expected. I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, pretending to study lottery tickets while my mind replayed the morning over and over. Two men stood nearby, both in their 60s, ball caps pulled low. Big wedding at St. Mark's today, one of them said. Heard it was real fancy. Yeah, the other replied. Bride's mom married well. Something in my chest tightened. Did you see the husband? The first man asked. The other shrugged. Don't think so. Heard he's, quiet. I wrapped my fingers around the hot cup, the heat stinging my palm. I didn't move. Didn't say a word. They drifted off toward the cooler conversation already forgotten. I stood there, coffee cooling, realizations settling in like dust. They weren't just erasing me from a list. They were erasing me from the story. Back in my truck, I sat with the engine off, hands in the wheel forehead, resting against it for a moment. The headache pulsed harder now, a reminder that this wasn't just emotional. It was physical. It was real. When I got home, I opened my laptop and started typing. Not an email, a letter to Emily. I wrote about Thekarola in the parking lot, about the braces, about the checks and the signatures, about how it felt to be told he didn't belong. Halfway through, my chest tightened again, not with anger, but with something like grief. It stopped. I read it back. Then I deleted it. Some things I realized weren't mean to be pleaded. I picked up the phone and called Mary Ann again. I don't want to cancel anything, I said, Winsheen's word. I don't want to hurt vendors or embarrass anyone. All right, she said, but I do want the truth in writing. That's reasonable, she replied. We'll send formal requests. Polite, professional, no accusations. I closed the folder and slid it back into the drawer, not because I was done with it, but because I knew exactly where it was now. Measure twice, cut once. That night, as the rain finally stopped and the house settled into silence, I slept for the first time in days. Not well, but enough. The letters went out the next morning. I didn't watch Mary Ann send them. I didn't need to. She told me exactly what they said. Short, professional, almost boring. Requests for confirmation, notices of record correction. A simple question asked in legal language. Who is the responsible party, and has that changed? No accusations, no threats, just paper asking other paper to tell the truth. Bimida morning, my phone started to buzz. It began with a call from Diane. I let it ring, then a text. Diane, what did you do? I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone face down on the table. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. I spent the morning in the garage organizing tools I hadn't touched in months. The smell of oil and metal calmed me. I wiped down my old gauges, coiled extension cords, lined things up like they mattered again. By noon, the phone was buzzing every few minutes. Emily called. I didn't answer. A number I didn't recognize popped up, Probablyrian. I ignored that, too. Around 1 o'clock, I heard the ping of an email notification from my laptop. I wiped my hands on a rag and went inside. It was from the venue coordinator at St. Mark's Fellowship Hall. Subject clarification notice. Event responsibility, Mr. Morrison. It began. Thank you for reaching out. We are reviewing our records and will confirm shortly. I read it twice. Then another email came in. This one from the caterer. Hi, Howlett. It said, just wanted to confirm. Are you still listed as the guarantor for Saturday's event? We're updating our files. Updating files. Words I understood. I was halfway through reading when my phone rang again. This time it was Diane. Again, I answered. How? She said, breathless. What is happening? What do you mean? I asked. Don't you know exactly what I mean? She snapped. The venue called me. The caterer called me. The band Ledrian's parents. Everyone's asking questions. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Questions about what, he asked. You're making this look like some kind of scandal, she said. Why would you do this the day after feuding? I opened my eyes. I didn't do anything yesterday. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. You know what I mean. You're trying to punish us. No, I said calmly. I'm correcting paperwork. It was just a list, Hal, she said. A seating list. A guest list. You're blowing this out of proportion. If it was just a list, I replied, why didn't you fix it? Silence. I could hear her breathing, no, uneven, angry. Because, she said finally, it wasn't the right time for what? For explanation, she said, for questions, for people looking at us and wondering why you married a man who fixes air conditioners. I finished. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I didn't want to deal with that. Diane said after a moment, her voice smaller now. I didn't want them asking who you were, what you did, why your name was on everything. I just wanted the day to be smooth. And I didn't fit. I said, "You don't understand," she insisted. "Rian's family is different. They notice things, so do I said. She started to cry then, not sobbing. Just that quiet, frustrated sound people make when their story stops working. You're being erased. She hung up on me. An hour later, a message popped up on my tablet. The one Diane and I shared for bills and calendars. A group chat I hadn't even known existed. "Emily, Mom, what did you do?" "Ryan, my parents are asking why contracts are in Hal's name." "Emily, this is embarrassing." Fix it, fix it." I stared at the screen, then locked it and set the tablet down. In the afternoon, I went for a walk around the block. The neighborhood looked the same as it always did. Lawns trimmed, flags fluttering, someone grilling. Even though it was barely 3 o'clock, Mrs. Keller from 2 houses down waved at me. Hal heard there was some drama at the church. I smiled politely. "People talk." "Well," she said, lowering her voice, "you always seemed like a good man." That one sentence almost broke me. Back home, is at the kitchen table again, opened my laptop, and started typing an email. "Diane, I never wanted to." I stopped, deleted the line, started again. This wasn't how I fix things anymore. Another mail chimed, this one from the DJ, Mr. Morrison. It read, "Thanks for clarifying the paperwork. Also, we found a credit from last year's fundraiser. Looks like we owe you a pie coupon." It laughed out loud. Just once, that evening, Marianne called. "They're scrambling," she said, "but everything is staying within bounds. You've done nothing wrong." "How does this end?" I asked. "That depends," she replied, "on whether they want the truth or the story." I thought about the church doors closing behind me, about the organ swelling without me there to hear it. "I think I know," I said. The invitation came the next day. A group dinner, family only, at a supper club outside town. Diane's idea. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'll be there." The supper club sat just outside Cedar Rapids, the kind of place that had been there longer than most of the marriages in town. Low brick building, dim amber lights, a sign out front that promised steaks, old fashions, and real portions. I arrived 10 minutes early. That wasn't nerves. That was habit. You show up early, you get your bearings, you don't let the room surprise you. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of butter and grilled meat. Silverware clinked against plates. Somewhere near the bar, someone laughed too loud. A waitress in sensible shoes carried a tray of drinks like she'd been doing it for 40 years and probably had. I chose a booth near the back vinyl seat, cracked with age, the kind that squeaked if you shifted your weight. I like that. It reminded me where I was. I set the yellow envelope in the table in front of me and rested my hands on either side of it. The envelope wasn't dramatic. No red stamp, no legal seal, just manila thick with paper. Truth didn't need dressing up. Diane walked in first. She spotted me immediately, then hesitated like she wasn't sure whether to come closer or turn around. Her dress was nice, too nice for a supper club. She looked tired. Her eyes darted around the room before settling back on me. Emily came in behind her, followed by Ryan and his parents. Emily looked different, not glowing the way brides do in photos, tight around the mouth, guarded. Ryan was firm on her back, guiding her like he owned the place. Ryan's father scanned the room with a practiced eye, the way men do when they're used to being important. His mother smiled thinly, at no one in particular. They slid into the booth across from me. For a moment, no one spoke. The waitress arrived like a referee. Drinks, Diane ordered a Chardonnay. Ryan's father ordered a bourbon. Emily asked for water. I ordered black coffee. The waitress nodded and walked away. Emily broke first. "Why are we here?" Her voice was sharp, but there was something underneath it. Confusion hurt. "Because you invited me," I said. "That was Mom." She snapped. Diane opened her mouth, closed it. Ryan leaned forward. "Look, Hal, we appreciate everything you've done, but this," he gestured vaguely. "This paperwork stuff, it's unnecessary." I nodded. "Unnecessary if you want to pretend it doesn't exist." Ryan frowned. "That's not what I mean." I reached forward and slid the yellow envelope and inched closer to the center of the table. "I didn't come to argue," I said. I came to explain. Emily folded her arms. Explain what? Why you embarrassed us. That word again. Embarrassed. I looked at her. Really looked. I saw the girl who used to sit on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade. The teenager who hurried in my truck after failing her driving test the first time. I didn't embarrass you, I said quietly. I corrected a lie. Diane's eyes flashed. How? I'm not talking about money, I said, holding up a hand. I'm talking about presence. Ryan's father cleared his throat. If this is about seating arrangements. It's not, I said. The waitress returned with drinks. She set them down carefully, sensing something heavy in the air. When she left, the silence felt louder. I opened the envelope. Paper slid against paper. A sound so ordinary, it almost felt insulting considering what it carried. It pulled out the first sheet and laid it flat on the table. This, I said, is the venue contract, page 3, responsible party. I didn't push it toward them. I let it sit where it was. My name, I continued my signature. Emily stared at it, then looked up at her mother. Mom. Diane looked away. I pulled out the next page. This is the insurance writer. Something. Another page. Caterer. Another ban. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I let each piece of paper land and stay there. The room had gone quiet around us. Forks paused midair at unforgettables. Someone coughed. Emily, I said, do you remember that summer your Kursak died in the hive lot? Her brow furrowed. Yeah, I fixed it on Thiesfault so you wouldn't be late for your interview. I said it was 92. I burned me hand on the compressor. She swallowed. I didn't do that because I wanted credit, I went on. I did it because that's what you do for family. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. His mother glanced at his father, then back at Theodable. How? Diane said softly now. We didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, I said. You erased me. Emily shook her head. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. I stood outside the church while 200 people walked past me like I didn't exist. Her eyes widened. I didn't know. I believe you, I said. That surprised her. Ryan scoffed. Come on, it was a mistake. I looked at him. Mistakes get fixed. Diane's voice cracked. I didn't want people asking questions. There it is, I said. She flinched. I didn't want them asking who you were. She whispered. What you did. Why your name was everywhere. And why is that? I asked. She looked up at me, eyes shiny, because I was tired of explaining. Ryan's father shifted in his seat. His expression had changed. Less confident now, more curious. I slid the final paper out of the envelope. These are canceled checks, I said. They don't lie. They don't care how things look. I gathered the papers back together, tapped them into a neat stack, and slid them back into the envelope. Then I closed it. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I'm asking for recognition. The table was silent. Then from the end of the booth, Ryan's mother spoke. That wasn't right. Ryan turned to her. Mom, no, she said firmly. That wasn't right. Emily's shoulder sagged. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I should have asked, she said. I should have noticed. I nodded. Yes. Diane reached for my hand. I pulled it back gently. I'm not angry, I said. But I'm done being invisible. I stood. The vinyl seat squeaked. Someone at a nearby table dropped a fork. It clattered against the floor. I looked at Emily, just her. I hope you're happy, I said, truly. Then I turned and walked toward the door. The bell above it jingled as I stepped outside into the cool evening air. I didn't look back. I didn't go straight home. I drove for a while with the windows down, letting the cool Iowa air move through the cab like it was clearing something out of me. The sky was fading from blue to that soft gray that comes before night. And the radio played low in old country station, the kind that doesn't try too hard. I pulled over by the Cedar River and sat there, engine off, listening to the water move. It smelled like damp earth and cut grass. Peaceful, honest. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The next few weeks were quiet in a way that felt strange at first. Diane moved through the house carefully, like someone afraid of knocking something over. We spoke about practical things, bills, schedules, groceries, but nothing deeper. There was a distance between us that hadn't been there before, or maybe had always been there. And I just finally noticed it. Was separated 3 months later. No shouting, no slam doors, just paperwork and signatures and the slow, sad understanding that something had broken a long time ago. And neither of us had wanted to look at it. I sold my share of the house and moved into a small place near the river. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a porch that caught the morning sun just right. The first night there, the place felt too quiet. No hum off Diane's TV, no sound of her moving around upstairs, just me, the ticking of an old wall clock, and the steady breath of the house settling. I slept anyway. Life got simpler after that. I started fishing again, early mornings, coffee in a thermos, the smell of river water, and mid. I joined a community workshop where old guys like me fixed lawnmowers and space heaters for people who couldn't afford new ones. No questions asked, no speeches. I like that. Emily wrote to me about a month after the dinner. Not a text, an actual letter. The envelope was thin, my name written carefully across front. Inside was a single page and a small photo tucked into the fold. The photo was old, faded, me standing in a high-A parking lot, leaning into the open hood of her Corolla. Emily sat in the driver's seat, grinning like she just won something. She must have found it in a drawer somewhere. The letter was short. Hell, I didn't know. I should have asked more questions. I'm sorry I didn't see you standing there. I see you now. Emily, that was it. No excuses, no admins. I sat at my little kitchen table, the one that wobbled if you leaned on it, and held that letter for a long time. It didn't fix everything, but it fixed enough. I wrote back just a note. Told her I hoped she was well. Told her I was proud of the woman she was becoming. I didn't bring up feuding. I didn't need to. Some things don't need to be reopened to be understood. I learned to cook for one. That took some getting used to. The first lasagna I made came out burned around the edges and cold in the middle. I stared at it fork in hand and laughed. Turns out dignity doesn't come with a recipe. I got better though. Chili, stew, eggs just the way I like them. Simple food that filled the house with good smells and didn't ask for applause. Sometimes late at night, I'd think back to that moment at the church. The clipboard, the whisper, the way I'd smiled and said, "It's okay," and I'd realize something important. It wasn't okay, but it didn't have to destroy me. For most of my life, I thought being a good man meant staying quiet, paying the bill, fixing the problem, and stepping out of the way. What I learned too late for some things, but not too late for myself, is that kindness isn't a blank check and silence isn't dignity. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand up, say nothing, and walk away with the truth in your pocket. I wasn't erased that day at the church. I was revealed. If you've ever found yourself standing on the outside of something you helped build, if you've ever been told directly or quietly that you didn't belong where you'd poured your time, your money, or your heart, I hope you remember this. Your name matters. Your presence matters. And you don't need anyone's permission to step back into your own life. If this story means something to you, if it stirred a memory or struck a nerve, I'd be honored if you shared it or shared your own story in the comments. And if you want to hear more quiet comebacks like this, stories about dignity, truth, and starting over, consider subscribing and staying a while. Sometimes the loudest statement is a calm voice that finally speaks.